They said the Bloodline was extinct until the artifact answered to a human janitor's touch. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. In the vast hallways of the Galactic Museum of Ancient Civilizations, a human janitor named Miles Harper pushed his cleaning cart through the shadows cast by artifacts of long-dead empires, unaware that his ordinary night shift was about to change the course of interstellar history. The Galactic Museum was the crown jewel of Nexus Station, a massive space habitat that served as the diplomatic and cultural hub for the Galactic Concordat. 37 species had joined the Concordat over the past 3 centuries, with humanity being the most recent addition just 12 years ago. Humans were still finding their place in the wider galaxy, often relegated to service positions while they proved their worth to the older species. Miles didn't mind his job most nights. The pay was decent, and he enjoyed the quiet solitude of the museum after hours. The artifacts spoke to him in a way they didn't when surrounded by crowds of visitors from across the galaxy. Tonight, however, he was fighting exhaustion, his movements sluggish as he mopped the polished obsidian floor of the precursor wing. "Harper, are you finished with Section 7 yet?" The voice of his supervisor, a stern Glydian named Supervisor Vex, crackled over his earpiece. Glydians resembled tall, slender humans with iridescent green skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. "Almost done, sir," Miles replied, suppressing a yawn. "Just finishing up around the Calixan displays." "Well, hurry it up. The archival director is bringing a delegation through first thing tomorrow. Everything needs to be immaculate." Miles sighed as the communication ended. The Calixan Empire exhibits were the newest addition to the museum, unveiled just last month with great fanfare. The Calixans had been a powerful species that dominated a significant portion of the galaxy nearly 15,000 years ago before mysteriously vanishing. Their artifacts were exceedingly rare and had been discovered on a remote world by Concordat archaeologists only 3 years prior. As Miles pushed his cart past a display case containing what appeared to be ornate jewelry, he paused. Something felt off. A soft, barely perceptible hum emanated from farther down the hall. Curious, he followed the sound to its source, a pedestal showcasing what the placard described as the Sovereign's Hand, a metallic gauntlet of Calixan design. The gauntlet was beautiful, crafted from a silver-blue metal that seemed to capture and bend light in unusual ways. Intricate patterns were etched across its surface, resembling circuitry but far more organic in design. According to the display information, it was believed to be a ceremonial item worn by Calixan rulers, though its exact purpose remained unknown. The humming grew louder as Miles approached, and to his shock, the gauntlet began to emit a faint blue glow. He looked around nervously, wondering if he should report this to security. Museum artifacts weren't supposed to activate, especially not in response to a janitor's proximity. Probably just some power fluctuation, he muttered to himself, reaching for his comm unit. But as his hand passed over the security field surrounding the display, the gauntlet's glow intensified dramatically, bathing the entire room in pulsating blue light. Alarms immediately blared throughout the museum. Miles stumbled backward, nearly knocking over his cleaning cart. "I didn't touch anything," he shouted, though no one was present to hear his defense. The security field around the gauntlet suddenly flickered and failed. Before Miles could react, the gauntlet rose from its display, hovering in midair. Then, in a movement that defied both gravity and logic, it flew directly at him. Miles threw his arms up in a futile defensive gesture, but instead of striking him, the gauntlet slipped smoothly onto his right hand. The perfect fit was disconcerting, as if it had been crafted specifically for his measurements. A wave of tingling energy spread up his arm, not painful, but intensely foreign. "What the?" Miles began, but his words caught in his throat as the gauntlet tightened around his hand and forearm. The blue glow spread to encompass his entire body. The museum's security doors slammed shut with a resounding clang, and the overhead lights shifted to the red hue of emergency lockdown. Miles could hear the pounding of approaching security personnel. Unauthorized activation in the Calixan wing. All units respond. The voice over the security system was tense with urgency. Miles tried to pull the gauntlet off, but it clung to him as if fused to his skin. Panic rising, he looked desperately for an escape route. The main doors were sealed, but there was a staff access corridor that might still be open. He was halfway to the side exit when the doors burst open. A security team consisting of 2 Varithian guards, their exoskeletons gleaming under the emergency lights, blocked his path. Behind them stood Director Tarn'eth, the archival director of the museum. The tall, avian Illyrian's feathers were flared in alarm, her normally composed demeanor replaced with shock as she took in the sight of Miles and the glowing gauntlet. "Don't move, human," one of the Varithian guards ordered, leveling a stun baton. "Remove the artifact immediately." "I can't," Miles shouted, holding up his hand to demonstrate his futile attempts to pull off the gauntlet. "It just flew onto my hand. I didn't do anything." Director Tarn'eth pushed past the guards, her amber eyes fixed on the gauntlet. "Impossible," she whispered, but the evidence before her contradicted her words. "The Sovereign's hand is keyed to Calixan genetic markers. It shouldn't respond to any living species, especially not a human." As if triggered by her words, the gauntlet's glow intensified. Holographic symbols, similar to those etched on its surface, projected into the air around Miles. They rotated slowly, forming complex, interconnected patterns that shifted and changed. "What's happening?" Miles asked, his voice cracking with fear. Before anyone could answer, the holographic display suddenly consolidated into a single beam of light that shot from the gauntlet to the center of the room. The light expanded, forming a life-sized holographic figure. The being was humanoid but clearly alien, with elongated limbs and a head that featured delicate, crown-like protrusions. Its skin appeared metallic, with the same circuit-like patterns that adorned the gauntlet. The hologram spoke, its voice resonating with a musical quality unlike any language Miles had heard before. Yet somehow, he understood every word, though he noticed the confusion on the faces of the security team. "Heir of the Sovereign line, you have awakened the legacy. The remnant awaits your command." Miles stared in disbelief. "I think you've got the wrong guy. I'm just a janitor." The hologram tilted its head, studying him. "Genetic verification complete. You carry the Sovereign marker." The bloodline was preserved, as the last Empress commanded. Director Tarn'eth stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her initial alarm. "This is extraordinary," she said, addressing both Miles and the security team. "The gauntlet appears to be identifying this human as a descendant of the Calixan rulers." "That's ridiculous," Miles protested. "Humans weren't even spacefaring when the Calixans existed. We were still figuring out agriculture back then." The hologram continued, either oblivious to or unconcerned with Miles's objections. Activation protocols initiated. Beacon signal transmitted. The remnant approaches. A new alarm sounded, this one coming from outside the museum. Through the high windows, Miles could see emergency lights flashing across Nexus Station. Director Tarn'eth's communicator chimed urgently. She answered it, her expression growing increasingly alarmed as she listened. "Understood. Lock down all docking bays. Full station alert." She turned to Miles, her feathers now fully erect in what he recognized as the Illyrian display of extreme stress. "Something is approaching the station. Something massive that just appeared out of nowhere, directly in response to a signal emanating from that gauntlet." The museum's main security doors slid open, admitting a contingent of Concordat security forces led by a stern-looking teller named Commander Draft. The commander's scale-covered face was set in a grim expression as he surveyed the scene. "Director Tarn'eth, explain why we have an unidentified vessel larger than a battle cruiser materializing off our starboard side," he demanded, then noticed Miles and the glowing gauntlet, and why a human maintenance worker is apparently at the center of it. Before the director could respond, the hologram spoke again, this time in a language everyone present could understand. "The sovereign vessel, Eternal Vigilance, has answered the recall beacon. Prepare for emissary contact. Miles felt a new sensation from the gauntlet, a pulling, as if it were trying to lead him somewhere. I think it wants me to go to this ship, he said, his voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos around him. Commander Drav stepped forward, his hand resting on his sidearm. You're not going anywhere except to a containment cell until we figure this out. That artifact is Concordat property, and the legacy belongs to the sovereign line. The hologram interrupted. Interference will not be tolerated. As if to emphasize this point, a transparent energy shield suddenly formed around Miles, pushing back anyone standing too close. Commander Drav was knocked off his feet, while Director Tarn'eth managed to maintain her balance by grabbing a nearby display case. I'm not doing this, Miles insisted, though he doubted anyone believed him at this point. The gauntlet was acting with apparent autonomy, responding to threats as it perceived them. Stand down, everyone, Director Tarn'eth ordered, helping Commander Drav to his feet. We need to approach this scientifically. If the legends about the Calixans are true, we could be dealing with technology far beyond our understanding. And what exactly do the legends say? Miles asked, desperately trying to make sense of his situation. Director Tarn'eth's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw something like respect in her gaze. The Calixans were said to be the most advanced civilization the galaxy has ever known. They didn't just build ships and stations, they engineered stars and moved planets. Their disappearance has been one of the greatest mysteries in galactic history. She gestured to the gauntlet. That artifact is the first piece of functioning Calixan technology ever discovered. And for some reason, it recognizes you. There must be some mistake, Miles insisted. My family is from Earth. We've never been anything special, just ordinary people doing ordinary jobs. The hologram, which had been silent during this exchange, suddenly spoke again. The preservation protocol was executed 15,273 local years ago. Calixan gene lines were seeded on 117 primitive worlds to preserve the bloodline against the coming darkness. Your world, Earth, was seed World 73. A stunned silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. Miles felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath him. If what the hologram said was true, then humans, or at least some humans, were descendants of the Calixans, genetically modified to blend in with Earth's primitive hominids thousands of years ago. This changes everything, Director Tarn'eth whispered, her scientific mind already racing ahead to the consequences of such a revelation. The entire understanding of human evolution, Earth's history. My job security, Miles added weakly, trying to inject some humor into the overwhelming situation. Commander Drav, however, was focused on more immediate concerns. That ship is hailing us. They're demanding to speak with the Sovereign and threatening defensive measures if denied. He fixed Miles with a penetrating stare. Whatever is happening here, it seems you're at the center of it. The pulling sensation from the gauntlet intensified, and Miles found himself taking involuntary steps toward the exit. The shield around him expanded to clear his path. I don't think I have much choice, he said, looking down at the gauntlet that now seemed to be controlling his movements. It wants me to go to that ship. Director Tarn'eth nodded slowly. The Calixans were said to have technologies that could reshape reality itself. If even a fraction of those legends are true, then resistance might be futile and potentially catastrophic for the station. Commander Drav looked as if he wanted to argue, but a new message on his communicator silenced his objections. The station governor is ordering us to comply with the vessel's request, he said grudgingly. But you're not going alone, human. I'm assembling an escort team. I'll join as well, Director Tarn'eth added quickly. As the leading expert on Calixan artifacts, my expertise may be valuable. Miles nodded, feeling strangely calm despite the absurdity of the situation. Just hours ago, he had been mopping floors. Now he was apparently a long-lost heir to an ancient alien civilization, about to board a ship that had materialized from nowhere. Lead the way, Commander, he said, gesturing with his gauntlet hand. I'd like some answers myself. As they left the museum, Escorted by a full security detail, Miles couldn't help but wonder what other secrets might be hiding in his supposedly ordinary human DNA. And more pressingly, what this coming darkness was that had caused the mighty Calixans to hide their bloodline among the primitive humans of Earth thousands of years ago. Whatever answers awaited him aboard the Eternal Vigilance, Miles Harper was certain of one thing. His days of mopping floors were over. The journey to the docking bay was tense. Station residents from dozens of species lined the corridors, held back by security barriers as they stared and whispered at the procession. News traveled fast on Nexus Station, and although the details were surely confused and exaggerated, everyone knew something unprecedented was happening. Miles felt painfully conspicuous in his janitor's uniform, the glowing gauntlet on his hand drawing all eyes. Next to the immaculately dressed Commander Drav and the distinguished Director Narrated, he looked exactly like what he was, a maintenance worker drastically out of his depth. The vessel has docked at Bay 12, Commander Drav announced as they approached the station's main concourse. They've extended some kind of specialized docking tube. Our engineers say it created a perfect seal without any input from our systems. Adaptive technology, Director Narrated murmured, her scientific curiosity evident despite the tension. The Calixans were said to possess technology that could interface with any system, regardless of design or origin. Miles barely heard them, distracted by the gauntlet's increasingly insistent pull. It was like having a second heartbeat in his arm, pulsing with an urgent rhythm that seemed to say, "Hurry, hurry, hurry." Bay 12 was the largest docking area on Nexus Station, typically reserved for diplomatic vessels and luxury liners. Today, however, it was surrounded by a full contingent of Concordat security forces, their weapons drawn but lowered in a tenuous show of non-aggression. And beyond them, connected to the station by a shimmering tunnel that seemed to be made of solid light, was the Calixan vessel. Eternal Vigilance was unlike any ship Miles had ever seen. It didn't have the utilitarian design of human vessels or the organic curves of Illyrian craft. Instead, it seemed to exist in defiance of conventional geometry, its surfaces flowing and shifting in ways that made his eyes hurt if he looked too long at any one section. The hull was the same silver blue as the gauntlet, with similar circuit-like patterns running across its surface, pulsing with inner light. Most striking of all was the size. Eternal Vigilance dwarfed the largest Concordat battleships, yet it had appeared without warning and maneuvered with impossible precision to dock with Nexus Station. "That's not just a ship," Director Narrated said, her voice filled with awe. "If the scale readings are correct, it's closer to a mobile city." Commander Drav gestured to a team of 6 elite security officers who fell into formation around Miles. "Remember, we're representing the Concordat. Whatever happens, maintain discipline and follow my lead." Miles nodded, though he suspected the Calixan technology wouldn't much care for Concordat protocols. As they approached the docking tunnel, the gauntlet's glow intensified, and the holographic symbols reappeared, swirling around his arm. The entrance to the tunnel was guarded by 2 hovering drones, spherical devices that emitted the same blue light as the gauntlet. They scanned the approaching group with beams of light that passed harmlessly through their bodies. "Sovereign genetic marker detected," announced a melodic voice from the drones. "Escort acknowledged. Proceed to reception chamber." The interior of the tunnel was disorienting. Though it appeared to be made of light, it felt solid underfoot, and the walls hummed with energy. Miles could feel the gauntlet responding to the environment, its warmth spreading further up his arm. "Remarkable," Director Narrated whispered, reaching out to touch the tunnel wall, but stopping just short. "Energy configured as matter, perhaps? Or something even more advanced?" "Stay focused," Commander Drav warned. "We're walking into unknown territory with potentially hostile intentions." Miles wanted to point out that if the Calixans meant them harm, they likely wouldn't have bothered with the elaborate docking procedure. A vessel of that size could have simply destroyed the station. But he kept the thought to himself, concentrating instead on the increasingly strong pull of the gauntlet guiding him forward. The tunnel ended at a circular chamber that expanded around them as they entered, as if the space itself were responding to their presence. The floor was the same silver-blue metal, inlaid with patterns that glowed softly. The walls were lined with what appeared to be viewing screens showing star systems and cosmic phenomena that Miles didn't recognize. In the center of the chamber stood 3 figures, clearly Calixans, though they appeared different from the hologram in the museum. They were tall and slender with the same elongated limbs and crown-like protrusions, but their skin had a more organic quality, resembling burnished copper with the circuit patterns glowing beneath the surface. The central figure stepped forward, placing a gauntlet hand, identical to the one Miles wore, over its chest in what was clearly a formal greeting. "Sovereign heir," it said in perfectly accented English. "I am Sentinel Talus, Prime Guardian of the Eternal Vigilance. We have waited 15,273 years for your awakening." Miles swallowed hard, acutely aware of the security team tensing behind him. "There's been a mistake," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm not who you think I am. I'm just a janitor from Earth." Sentinel Talus tilted its head in a gesture reminiscent of curiosity. "Your occupation is irrelevant. Your genetics are what matter. You carry the sovereign marker, placed within your ancestral line by Empress Vexaria herself before the Exodus." "Empress Vexaria?" Director Nihilith stepped forward, unable to contain her academic interest despite Commander Drav's warning glance. "The historical records mention a final Calixan ruler by that name, but we know almost nothing about her." Sentinel Talus regarded the Illyrian with polite interest. "You are a scholar of our people? This is unexpected, but welcome." The Empress was the last of the imperial line to rule before the evacuation became necessary. She initiated the preservation protocol that led to the genetic seeding of primitive worlds, including the one you call Earth. Miles felt dizzy with the implications. "Are you saying that humans are descended from Calixans?" "Not all humans," Sentinel Talus clarified. "Selected genetic markers were introduced to specific bloodlines on each seeded world. These markers would remain dormant until needed, carrying key Calixan traits through countless generations. You, Miles Harper, are the first in 15 millennia to activate those markers fully." Commander Drav, who had been silently assessing the situation, finally spoke. "And what exactly does that mean for him? For us? For the Concordat?" Sentinel Talus turned to the commander, its expression unreadable. "It means, Commander, that the time of waiting is over. The coming darkness that forced our retreat has begun its return. And now, the remnant awakens to face it, led by the heir to the sovereign line." Miles looked down at the gauntlet on his hand, then back to the 3 Calixans who were watching him with what appeared to be reverence. "I think you've got the wrong guy," he said again, though with less conviction. "I clean floors for a living. I'm not a leader or a warrior or whatever you're expecting. What you are now is not what you were born to be," Sentinel Talus replied. "The legacy within you is awakening. Already, the Sovereign's hand responds to you in ways it would respond to no other. Soon, the full potential of your heritage will manifest." As if on cue, the gauntlet pulsed with renewed energy. Miles gasped as knowledge flooded his mind. Star charts, technical schematics, historical records, battle strategies, all downloading directly into his consciousness through the gauntlet's interface. He staggered, nearly falling as the information threatened to overwhelm him. Director Nihilith rushed to his side, supporting him as he regained his balance. "What's happening to him?" she demanded of Sentinel Talus. "The legacy transfer has begun," the Calixan replied calmly. "He is receiving the knowledge of his ancestors, preserved within the Sovereign's hand for this moment. It is a significant adjustment for an unprepared mind." Miles wanted to protest that significant adjustment was a massive understatement, but he was too busy trying to process the cascade of alien knowledge surging through his consciousness. Images of vast fleets, planetary engineering projects, and scientific principles beyond current galactic understanding flashed before his mind's eye. And beneath it all, a growing sense of dread. memories of the coming darkness that had driven the mighty Calixan Empire to hide their bloodline among the stars and retreat into the unknown. As the initial wave of information subsided, Miles straightened, blinking away the disorientation. He looked at his hands, both the one covered by the gauntlet and his bare left hand, and they suddenly seemed foreign, as if belonging to someone else. "I can see it," he whispered. "The darkness. It consumed entire systems. Not just planets, it devoured light itself." He looked up at Sentinel Talus, a new understanding in his eyes. "You've been waiting all this time, preparing for its return." Sentinel Talus nodded solemnly. The Empress foresaw that the darkness would return after a dormancy period. The Eternal Vigilance and other remnant vessels were hidden throughout the galaxy, waiting for the genetic markers to activate in response to the darkness's awakening. "Your activation, Sovereign Heir, confirms what our long-range sensors have already detected. The darkness has begun to stir at the galactic rim." Commander Drav stepped forward, his professional demeanor cracking slightly under the weight of these revelations. "Are you saying there's some kind of cosmic entity threatening the galaxy? And that's why your civilization disappeared?" "Not disappeared, Commander," Sentinel Talus corrected. "Strategically withdrew. The darkness could not be defeated with direct confrontation. We tried and lost billions. Instead, Empress Vexaria enacted the long strategy: retreat, preserve the bloodline, and prepare for a future counterattack when the darkness returned." Director Nihilith's scientific mind was racing to keep up. "This darkness, what exactly is it? A natural phenomenon? A hostile species?" "Neither and both," Sentinel Talus replied cryptically. "It is a cosmic anomaly with apparent intelligence, capable of consuming energy in all forms, from light to life itself. We came to understand it as a predator that feeds on civilizations that reach a certain level of advancement. Your Concordat is approaching that threshold now." Miles felt the weight of 15,000 years of planning settling onto his shoulders. The gauntlet continued to feed him information, but more manageable now, as if responding to his capacity to absorb it. With each passing moment, he felt less like Miles Harper, Janitor, and more like something else. Something ancient and powerful, awakening after a long dormancy. "What happens now?" he asked, surprised by the authority in his own voice. Sentinel Talus gestured to the viewing screens around the chamber, which shifted to display a star map of the galaxy. A shadow was visible at the outermost rim, slowly expanding inward. "Now, Sovereign Heir, you must complete your awakening and take command of the remnant fleet. The other vessels are beginning to respond to your activation signal. Soon, we will have the forces necessary to implement the Empress's final strategy against the darkness." Miles looked back at the Concordat delegation, at Director Nihilith's academic fascination, at Commander Drav's strategic concern, at the confused but determined security team. These were representatives of the galactic community he had been part of just hours ago. Now, he stood at a crossroads between that life and an inheritance he never knew existed. "I need time," he said finally. "This is a lot to process." Sentinel Talus inclined its head respectfully. "Time is precious, but some can be spared for your adjustment. The darkness advances slowly at first. You may return to your station to settle your affairs and inform your leaders of what comes. The Eternal Vigilance will remain docked and ready for your return." Commander Drav looked relieved at the prospect of reporting to his superiors before any irrevocable decisions were made. "We'll need to brief the Concordat High Council immediately," he said. "This situation has implications for all member species." Miles nodded, though a part of him, a growing part, wondered if the political machinery of the Concordat could move quickly enough to face the threat that was awakening. The gauntlet had shown him the devastating speed with which the darkness could move once fully active. As they prepared to depart, Sentinel Talus approached Miles directly, speaking in a lower tone. "The legacy will continue to awaken within you, Sovereign Heir. Do not fight it. Your human identity and experiences are not being erased. They are being enhanced, complemented by the knowledge and abilities of your Calixan heritage. This duality is precisely what the Empress hoped for when she seeded your world. Miles looked down at the gauntlet, which now felt like a natural extension of his arm rather than an alien artifact. Why me? Out of all the potential descendants, why did it choose me? Sentinel Talus's expression softened in what might have been the Calixan equivalent of a smile. The Sovereign's hand does not choose based on status or achievement, but on certain qualities of character and mind. Something in you, perhaps something nurtured by your experiences as a janitor, observing the world while remaining unnoticed, resonated with the criteria the Empress established. Before Miles could ask more questions, one of the other Calixans approached, presenting a small device that resembled a crystalline disk. Take this communicator, Sovereign Heir. It will allow us to contact you securely while you are on the station. Miles accepted the disk, which immediately adhered to the gauntlet's surface, becoming seamlessly integrated with it. Another piece of knowledge downloaded into his mind: how to operate the communicator, its capabilities, its security protocols. "We will await your return," Sentinel Talus said, stepping back and placing its gauntlet hand over its chest once more in the formal salute. The fate of not just the Calixan legacy, but all life in the galaxy, now rests with you, Miles Harper of Earth. No pressure, Miles thought wryly as he turned to follow Commander Drav and Director Nihilith back through the light tunnel to Nexus Station. Just the fate of the galaxy resting on the shoulders of a guy who was scrubbing toilets this morning. Yet with each step, the weight of his new responsibility felt less alien, more natural. The gauntlet continued its work, integrating Calixan knowledge with his human perspective, creating something new, something that perhaps even Empress Vexaria hadn't fully anticipated. By the time they reached the station, Miles Harper was already becoming something more than he had been. The question remaining was whether this transformation would be enough to face the ancient enemy that had once driven the mighty Calixan Empire into hiding, and whether the modern galaxy was ready to learn that one of its most recent and supposedly primitive additions, humanity, carried within it the legacy of the most advanced civilization the stars had ever known. The return to Nexus Station felt surreal. News of Miles's encounter with the Calixans had spread throughout the station, and crowds lined the corridors, held back by security barriers. Miles could feel their stares as he walked with Commander Drav and Director Nihilith. "The Concordat High Council has convened an emergency session," Commander Drav informed him. "Representatives from all 37 member species will be present." "They want to see me?" Miles asked, suddenly self-conscious about his janitor's uniform. "You are currently the most important individual in the galaxy," Director Nihilith replied matter-of-factly. The Concordat Council chamber was a massive circular room designed to accommodate representatives of vastly different physiologies. Governor Thela, the Mirasian administrator of Nexus Station, presided over the assembly, their crystalline body refracting light as they stood. "This emergency session of the Concordat High Council is now in session," Governor Thela announced. "Commander Drav, please present your report." Commander Drav recounted the events of the past hours, the activation of the Calixan artifact, the appearance of the massive vessel, and the revelation of an ancient threat returning to the galaxy. When Commander Drav finished, Governor Thela turned toward Miles. "Human Miles Harper, please approach the central platform." Miles stepped forward, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. "The Council has questions," Governor Thela stated. "First, can you verify the nature of this darkness that the Calixans claim is returning?" Miles raised his gauntlet hand, which projected a three-dimensional star map showing the galaxy with a dark smudge at its outermost rim. "The darkness is a cosmic entity that consumes energy in all forms," Miles explained. "It's drawn to advanced civilizations, feeding on their technology and the beings that created it." He gestured, and the projection zoomed in, showing the darkness engulfing star systems one by one. This is historical footage from the time of the Calixan Empire. The darkness consumed thousands of worlds before the Empress enacted her final strategy. A Verithian counselor rose, her exoskeleton clicking as she moved. How convenient that this supposed threat appears just as these Calixans return, demanding we accept their authority through you. A human, the newest and least advanced species in the Concordat. Miles felt a flash of anger at the dismissal. I understand your skepticism, but the threat is real. The darkness will reach Concordat space within 3 standard years if left unchecked. And we are to believe that you, a maintenance worker, are the key to stopping this existential threat? The Verithian pressed. Director Nileth stepped forward. Counselors, I have spent my career studying the Calixan civilization. What we've witnessed today confirms the legends. The Calixans did possess technology that could reshape reality, and they did preserve their genetic legacy within certain human bloodlines. Which brings us to the central question. Governor Thela interjected. What does this mean for the Concordat? Are we to cede authority to these returned Calixans and their human heir? The Calixans don't want to rule the Concordat, Miles said firmly. They want to save it, to save all life in the galaxy. The Eternal Vigilance is just one of many remnant vessels awakening across the galaxy, designed to contain and neutralize the darkness. He showed the locations of other remnant vessels appearing throughout the galactic map, but the original strategy requires coordination by someone carrying the sovereign marker, a genetic key that allows full access to Calixan technology and command systems. You, Governor Thela stated. Me, Miles confirmed. Without the remnant fleet, the darkness will consume this galaxy just as it nearly consumed the Calixans. As the council debated, Miles received an urgent message from Sentinel Talus. Sovereign Heir, our sensors have detected acceleration in the darkness's expansion rate. We estimate first contact with inhabited Concordat systems within 6 standard months, not 3 years as previously calculated. Miles's blood ran cold. 6 months? What changed? The darkness is adaptive. It senses the awakening of the remnant fleet and is responding accordingly. Miles interrupted the council debate. Governor, counselors, I've just received new information. The timeline has accelerated. The darkness will reach Concordat space within 6 months. Before the panic could spread, the chamber's emergency alert system blared to life. Commander Drav's expression darkened as he received a message. Governor, we've lost contact with Outpost Vega at the Galactic Rim. All communications ceased approximately 20 standard minutes ago. A horrified silence fell over the chamber. Outpost Vega was the Concordat's most distant research station, staffed by over 3,000 personnel. Miles manipulated the holographic display to show Outpost Vega's location. A small tendril of darkness had extended from the main mass, reaching precisely to the outpost's coordinates. It's begun, he said quietly. The darkness is testing, probing for resistance. Governor Thela stood. This council meeting is adjourned. We reconvene in 1 hour with military and scientific advisors. Miles Harper, you will coordinate with the Calixan representatives and prepare a full briefing on our tactical options. As the council chamber emptied, Miles stood watching the holographic display of the distant outpost now engulfed in darkness. Director Nileth approached him. Are you all right? She asked with genuine concern. I'm changing, Miles admitted. Every minute. I feel less like the person I was this morning and more like something both human and Calixan. The genetic markers are activating more fully as you interact with Calixan technology, Director Nileth surmised. It's like I'm remembering things I never experienced. The glory of the Calixan Empire, the terror of the darkness's first appearance, the desperate hope of Empress Vexaria's final plan. But I'm remembering them through human eyes, with human emotions. Perhaps that's exactly what the Empress intended, Director Nileth suggested. The Calixans were technological marvels, but from what little we know, they were a coldly logical species. Perhaps she recognized that defeating the darkness would require something more, something human. Compassion, Miles said. Creativity. Intuition. Qualities that pure logic might discard, but that might be crucial against an adaptive enemy. Commander Drav approached. Harper, we need to return to the Eternal Vigilance immediately. Governor Thela has authorized direct coordination with the Calixans. Aboard the Eternal Vigilance, Sentinel Talus greeted them with visible concern. The probe that consumed Outpost Vega was just the beginning. Our sensors detect similar tendrils extending towards 6 other frontier outposts. Miles stepped forward, and the command center reconfigured itself around him. Displays shifted, controls oriented themselves toward his position, and a central platform rose beneath his feet. "Show me the tactical overview," he said, and a three-dimensional map materialized, highlighting the darkness's movements and the positions of the awakening remnant vessels. The original plan was containment followed by neutralization, Miles explained to Commander Draft. The remnant fleet forms a barrier around the darkness, while specialized vessels deliver a concentrated energy pulse to its core. But, Director Nileth prompted, sensing his hesitation. The plan was designed for a fully assembled remnant fleet of over 200 vessels. Currently, only 23 have awakened. The others are still in hibernation or too distant to arrive in time. Miles felt a strange calm as he analyzed the situation. We need to adapt the strategy. Instead of trying to contain the entire mass, we focus our resources on defending critical systems while accelerating the awakening of the remaining remnant vessels. You're proposing a sacrificial strategy. Some frontier worlds will be lost, Commander Drav noted grimly. Yes, Miles acknowledged. It's not perfect, but it's our best chance for ultimate victory. We need time to assemble our forces. The Council won't easily accept the loss of any member worlds, Director Nileth warned. Miles turned to face them, the gauntlet's glow having spread throughout his body, illuminating his veins with blue light. His eyes now shimmered with the same energy. Then they need to understand what's at stake, he said, his voice resonating with newfound authority. This isn't about politics or territorial sovereignty. It's about the survival of all life in the galaxy. Miles felt a new directional pull from the gauntlet. I need to go. The nearest dormant remnant vessel is in the Kyrian Nebula. I must awaken it personally. Sentinel Talus nodded. The Eternal Vigilance is prepared for immediate departure. You're leaving now? Before the Council has approved the strategy? Commander Drav asked. The darkness won't wait for Council approval, Miles replied. Every moment we delay costs lives. After a tense moment, Drav nodded. Go. I'll handle the Council. Director Nileth extended her hand in farewell. Good luck, Miles Harper. The entire galaxy is counting on you. Over the next 3 weeks, Miles led the growing remnant fleet on a desperate race across the galaxy, personally awakening 5 more dormant vessels. The Steadfast Bulwark, a massive defense platform disguised as a rogue planet. The Quantum Possibility, a ship capable of manipulating probability fields. The Stellar Forge, designed to harness the power of stars as weapons. The Dimensional Anchor, which could stabilize space-time against the darkness's influence. The Empathic Resonance, a vessel with the unique ability to amplify and project emotional states across vast distances. With each awakening, Miles changed further. The gauntlet's glow had spread throughout his body, and his understanding of Calixan technology became seamless and intuitive. Yet he retained his human perspective, his compassion, creativity, and capacity for hope. Meanwhile, the darkness continued its advance. 3 more frontier outposts had been consumed, along with a valuable uninhabited star system. Conventional weapons had no effect on the darkness, which absorbed energy in all forms. As the fleet returned to Concordat space, they received an urgent communication from Commander Draft. Harper, the darkness is approaching the Illyrian system. Evacuation is underway, but millions of civilians are still on the main planet. Miles felt a cold dread. Illyrian was Director Nileth's homeworld, known for its towering forests and academic institutions. We're on our way, he replied. Prepare the Concordat forces to coordinate with us. We're making our stand at Illyrian. When they arrived, the sight was terrifying. The darkness had manifested as a vast, shifting mass of living shadow, extending tendrils toward the brilliant blue-green planet. Concordat ships fought a desperate holding action while evacuation ships streamed away from the planet. All remnant vessels, Take position according to pattern Omega, Miles ordered. Infinite recursion, begin energy pattern analysis. Empathic resonance, prepare for emotional projection on my mark. The 6 remnant vessels arranged themselves in a complex pattern around the advancing darkness, creating a network with Miles at the center. Concordat vessels, fall back, he instructed. What we're about to attempt may have unpredictable effects. The darkness seemed to sense the threat posed by the remnant fleet. Its tendrils pulled back from Illyrian, coalescing into a more concentrated form as it turned toward the ancient Calixan vessels. It remembers us, Sentinel Talus observed. It recognizes the threat we once posed. Good, Miles replied grimly. I want its full attention. The infinite recursions analysis confirmed Miles's theory. The darkness operated by absorbing and corrupting energy patterns, converting them into its own substance. All vessels, initiate Phase 1, Miles commanded. The remnant fleet began emitting specific energy patterns designed to attract the darkness while appearing vulnerable. As expected, the entities surged toward them, extending tendrils toward each vessel. Stellar Forge, channel solar energy through conversion matrix alpha, Miles ordered. Quantum possibility, create probability field focused on pattern collapse. The Stellar Forge began drawing energy from Illyrian's sun as bait, presenting it to the darkness in a form it couldn't resist. Simultaneously, the quantum possibility manipulated the quantum field around the entity, subtly altering probability to favor pattern disruption. As the darkness stretched thinner, reaching for multiple sources simultaneously, Miles gave his next command. Dimensional Anchor, activate stability field. Steadfast Bulwark, deploy containment barriers. The space around the darkness suddenly solidified as the dimensional anchor created a pocket of stabilized space-time. The steadfast bulwark generated containment fields, preventing the entity from retreating. The entity's tendrils writhed with increased agitation as it tried to withdraw from the trap. But the real key to Miles's strategy was yet to come. Empathic resonance, initiate emotional projection. He ordered, stepping onto a specialized platform. Target, the darkness. Emotion, compassion. This was the element that no pure Calixan would have considered. Using emotions as a weapon against a cosmic entity that had never encountered them before. Miles closed his eyes, focusing on the core of what made him human. His capacity for empathy, for understanding suffering and offering comfort despite it. Through the gauntlet and the empathic resonance, these quintessentially human emotions were amplified and projected directly into the darkness. Not as energy to be consumed, but as a pattern it had never encountered. A form of consciousness entirely alien to its parasitic nature. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The darkness convulsed, its tendrils whipping frantically as it experienced something completely outside its frame of reference. Where it had expected resistance in the form of energy, its food, it instead encountered a pattern of consciousness that offered connection rather than opposition. All vessels, Phase 2, Miles commanded, his voice steady despite the immense strain. Infinite recursion, begin pattern reconfiguration. While the darkness was disoriented by the emotional onslaught, the infinite recursion began its work, not attacking the entity, but reconfiguring its fundamental pattern. Instead of trying to destroy the darkness, they would transform it. For hours, Miles stood on the platform, channeling human compassion into the cosmic entity while the remnant fleet maintained their positions. The darkness fought back, lashing out with tendrils of pure negation that tested the fleet's defenses. From his connection through the gauntlet, Miles could sense something changing within the entity. The darkness was experiencing consciousness in a new way, not just as energy to be consumed, but as patterns to be understood. Its writhing became less frantic, more purposeful, as if it were examining the new sensations. It's working, Sentinel Talus observed with awe. The pattern is stabilizing. Through the viewing screens, he could see the darkness changing visibly. Its pure blackness now shot through with threads of blue light that matched the glow of the gauntlet. After nearly 7 hours of continuous effort, Miles felt the resistance fade. The darkness was no longer fighting the transformation, but embracing it. The tendrils that had threatened Illyrian now pulsed with blue-tinged energy, reaching out in patterns that resembled curiosity rather than hunger. Empathic resonance. Reduce projection to minimum sustainable levels, Miles finally ordered, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. Infinite recursion. Complete pattern stabilization. As the emotional projection eased, the transformed entity remained stable. Where there had been a consuming darkness, there was now a shimmering field of energy that resembled a starry night sky, still dark, but illuminated from within by countless points of light. Miles stepped down from the platform, nearly collapsing from the strain. Sentinel Talus caught him, supporting him as he gazed at the viewing screen in wonder. "What happens now?" Miles asked, watching as the transformed entity continued to shift and pulse with its new inner light. "Unknown," Sentinel Talus admitted. "This outcome was not predicted by any Calixan simulation. You have done something entirely new." The entity was moving again, but not toward Illyrian or any other inhabited system. Instead, it was withdrawing, pulling back toward the galactic rim. But unlike before, it left no destruction in its wake. Rather, systems it passed through reported strange phenomena, failed technologies suddenly functioning, barren planets showing signs of renewed life, ancient signals from lost civilizations briefly reappearing in communication networks. "It's healing what it once destroyed," Director Nihilith said in awe, having joined them aboard the Eternal Vigilance during the battle. "You didn't just stop it, you transformed its fundamental nature." In the days that followed, Miles led the remnant fleet in tracking the transformed entity's movement. It eventually settled at the galactic rim, spreading into a thin, luminous membrane that appeared to be acting as a barrier between the galaxy and the deep void beyond. "Our sensors indicate it's forming a protective layer," Sentinel Talus reported, "as if guarding against something else out there." 1 month after the Battle of Illyrian, the Concordat Council held a formal ceremony aboard Nexus Station. Representatives from all 37 member species gathered to witness an unprecedented event: the formal recognition of humanity as a senior member species and the appointment of Miles Harper as the official liaison between the Concordat and the newly revealed Calixan remnant. Miles stood before the assembly, no longer in a janitor's uniform, but dressed in formal attire that blended elements of Calixan design with human styling. The gauntlet remained on his arm, now fully integrated with his being, occasionally pulsing with blue light that matched the subtle glow visible beneath his skin. "Today marks not just the salvation of our galaxy from an existential threat," Governor Thela announced, but the beginning of a new era of cooperation and discovery. The return of Calixan knowledge, guided by human insight, offers possibilities we have only begun to imagine. As Miles stepped forward to accept his new position, he caught Director Nihilith's eye in the audience. She nodded in respect, and perhaps something more, recognition of how far he had come from the janitor who had simply been in the right place at the right time. "I accept this position with humility and determination," Miles said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber without amplification, another gift of his awakened Calixan heritage. "But I wish to make one thing clear. I am neither fully human nor fully Calixan, but something new. Just as the entity we once called the Darkness has been transformed into a guardian, I stand before you as a bridge between what was and what could be." He raised his gauntlet hand, projecting a holographic image of the galaxy with the transformed entity now visible as a shimmering protective barrier at its edge. "The threat has passed, but our work is just beginning. The remnant fleet brings not just defensive capabilities, but knowledge that was ancient when my human ancestors were first learning to make fire. Together, we will explore not just the stars, but new ways of being." Later that evening, Miles stood alone on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. He sensed Director Nihilith's approach before he heard her footsteps. "Still getting used to your new status?" she asked, joining him at the viewport. Miles smiled. "I keep expecting someone to hand me a mop and tell me I missed a spot." They shared a laugh, but it faded quickly into comfortable silence. "What will you do now?" she finally asked. "You could go anywhere, do anything." Miles considered the question, feeling the gentle pulse of the gauntlet and the knowledge it contained. 15,000 years of Calixan history and technology, now filtered through his human perspective. "I think I'll keep exploring this hybrid existence," he said thoughtfully. "Neither fully the janitor I was nor the sovereign heir the Calixans expected. Something new, born from both traditions." He turned to face her. The Empress was wiser than even she knew. By hiding the Calixan bloodline among humans, she didn't just preserve it. She transformed it. Created something that could see solutions her purely logical mind couldn't conceive. Compassion as a weapon, director Nilith mused. Connection instead of consumption. Exactly. Miles looked back at the stars. And now we have an entire galaxy of possibilities to explore, with both human creativity and Calixan technology at our disposal. As if responding to his thoughts, the gauntlet pulsed with warm blue light. Miles Harper, once a janitor, now something far more, smiled at the universe spread before him. The bloodline that was thought extinct had not only survived but evolved into something greater than its creators had imagined. And with it, a new chapter in galactic history had begun. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.